I guess all I can do is embrace the pandemonium. Find happiness in the unique insanity of being here. Now, Eleanor Shellstrop, Kirsten Bell in The Good Place. Good evening. Welcome back, I guess, if you're here watching from the previous live stream. Something special for y'all. I've got the answer, and I'm gonna let you guys know the answer for the easy price of $100 billion. Once you guys raise that much money, I'll go ahead and tell you the answer. Nah, I'm just kidding. You're not gonna find anyone to tell you the answer of everything, especially if they have a price attached to it, because they know you don't know the answer, so they can say whatever they want. But you know, and if you're gonna pay for the answer, yeah, they're probably also gonna be like, "Hey, this guy's a chump." All right, that was the last chat. Sorry. All right. Before I get into the seriousness and not so seriousness of the topic, The Good Place I wanted to review, but the review is just gonna say go watch it. So far it's the end of season 3. It's got on Netflix. Me and my wife were watching it. We both like it. It's funny, it's shallow, and it's deep. You get a mix. Jeremy Bearimy. And another one to watch is The Hollow. It's only one season. It's not that good, but it's got some stuff that you might think is kind of esoteric, maybe trippy, deep, kind of. It really depends on how you're thinking and following along, but or if you're not thinking, that too. Okay, I want to show you guys something. Now, this is where it gets. Let's see where to go. All right, this is where it gets deep. Now, on that title, I show you a couple of things, right? But one thing to focus on in the answer is don't really focus on the answer. Because I could tell you, let's just really, how do I say this? Okay, so if you know the question, you can figure out how to get to the answer. All right, that's the 1 plus 2. You know what that's going to be? That's a 3. Okay. Now, in that type of, we don't live in that type of reality, unfortunately. I'm sorry to tell you that. Yeah, it feels like it should be like a big, nice, fine-tuned machine where everything's predestined and destined to be whatever it is. As long as you've got everything lined up correctly, it's going to be that. That's not where we're at. You know where we're at? We're at the equals 3. Yeah, whatever it is, whatever the answer that you want is, that answer is about how you get there. Okay, so it really doesn't matter what the answer is. It really depends on what answer you want. And with the answer that you want, how are you going to obtain it? Yeah, some I guess you could say people kind of have a little bit of a head start on knowing what the answer is, and kind of a vague process on how to get there. Not quite, because they're trying to like fidge the data a little bit. It's like, I want to get to 3, but I don't want 1 involved, and I don't want 2 involved, so how do I get to 3? So they're going to try to figure out, okay, let's not use 1, let's not use 2, maybe we'll use 4, and maybe we'll use 8. Maybe that'll get me to 3. How exactly? Well, you got to figure that out on your own. So that is the answer. The answer isn't the question, it's the answer. is the process of getting to the answer. And that is just an answer I can't give you, because that's the answer I don't know. And I know this is kind of a little deep and silly, and it's not so serious and serious at the same time. But it's the best way I can kind of reveal to you, I guess. A lot of people, I would say many times in your life, you've already known what the answer is. You just wasn't sure that that was it, because it doesn't make sense, and it makes all the sense in the world as well. It's very confusing and not so confusing. It's so simple that it can be confusing. And I guess that's pretty much it. I mean, just gave you guys the answer to the entirety. And so what I take it as is you could experiment, you could play with a lot of different excuse me with a lot of different variabilities and things like that, or something that's pretty constant in what we experience here, and just kind of play around with it, see what happens. And that's pretty much the entire purpose, because if we already knew what happens when you do 1 + 2 and you're going to get whatever it is, then we don't need to do anything. We've already got the answers. We already know how to get to the answers. And it's like, what's the entire point? Why are we here? Exactly. Right? So why are we here? It's not because we already know the answer and we already know how to get to the answer. It's because we want to find out, how do we get to the answer when we should know the answer, but we don't get the same results. And that's like very unscientific. It's like, if we don't get the same results, the same way to get to the same results, then how do we know it's correct? I mean, then anything could happen, and anything could happen with that result. Doesn't make sense. Yeah, but it does. It does make sense, because not everything is the same. Because if everything was the same, we wouldn't have anything different. And we see a lot of things that are different. And what's the purpose of being all the same or everything being different? We have to contrast and just mix and unmix and things like that. We just have to kind of formulate what exactly we want, not just as a whole, but individually. And it's a tremendous undertaking, is all I gotta say. That is that just so many variables, and it's kind of astounding. It's amazing though, right? Just think of it as a destination, right? Let's all go to the North Pole, the magnetic North Pole, right? Let's all go there. And how are you going to get there? Well, one, you're going to say, well, the compass always points north, so we'll just follow the compass. And that's kind of just more direct approach. But then you're going to go, well, how do you get there knowing that that's north? Well, I guess I'll take a flight over to Canada, then I'll take a boat up there, and then I'll walk the rest of the way, climb a mountain or whatever. It's not going to be the same way everyone else takes. Everyone's going to take a different method of getting there. And not everyone will get there. Some people won't get there. Some people will get there. But the thing is, we all know we can get there, but how we can get there is just another matter entirely. I'm pretty sure there's been a lot of attempts to get to the magnetic North Pole, different ways, what works, what doesn't, and not one way is necessarily better than the other, and it's just not even just the location itself. This is the person going to that location, because I'm pretty sure there have been people who have gone to that location trying to follow in someone else's footsteps, but they couldn't make it. And it's almost kind of like a spell in a way. If you're like Dungeons & Dragons, think of it casting a spell. You've got different types of regions that you're going to use. It's basically ingredients for a spell that you're going to cast. And you can, if you're going to cast a specific spell, yeah, you're going to know exactly what ingredients you're going to use. But if you use different ingredients that you have no idea what the outcome is, you use it and then you're going to get a result, whether it's a good result or bad result, whatever. But also, it also depends on the experience of the individual and the statistics of the individual, basically what they're capable of, and a whole bunch of different variables. There's just so many variables. This is just what I'm trying to say. And I think for many of you who watch, I think you guys get this now. For those of you who don't watch, well, you guys are probably watching something else right now. I mean, what's the point? Let's see. Portfolio go at 1.5 plus 1.5. Eagle plane anchor, whoever get there wins. Maybe that's how God made it. Not necessarily. Could be. I think that'd be a fun way to find out. But I don't like using the term God just because it's a term made to describe something that is something, and if they're wrong about what that something is, or there's just another persona of that something, then it's entirely wrong. But if it is, I mean, that's entirely right. But if it's to be a description of something that can't be described, then it's wrong. So I don't know. I don't want to use another terminology of something that was used thousands of years or so ago, and doesn't pertain to exactly what it is. It's like one thing for one folk, another thing for another folk. But then again, here's the funny thing about the secret societies, the inner knowledge of certain religious denominations, whatever. You know, you've got the stuff that's for common folk, and there's some stuff for less than common folk, however they want to dictate that. And they've got basically people who, I wouldn't say people, let's just say people who have explored and tried to describe what they've explored to share with people so that other people could understand. And they're messing with the regions, not knowing exactly how to get there, because they really don't know, but they like to pretend they know. But they also see that there are results out there, and it's always fine-tuned. It's like, hey, let's do this and a little less of that, and let's see if we can do that and see if that works. The only problem is, well, you've got a whole bunch of variables, not necessarily material variables, but you got intangible variables that can't be measured, which is just mind-boggling for a lot of people. It's like, how can we measure something that can't be measured? It's like, well, you gotta figure that out, huh? But I think a lot of them are waiting for a lot of us to just kind of show them, because I'm pretty sure that there's been a lot of experiments and tests that have been done, and I'd say there's also been a lot of what do you call it? It's not when you kill somebody, it's when you torture. There's been a lot of torture involved. The thing is, a lot of the ones that are trying to just, hey, I don't care who knows, a I want everyone to know. But I don't know how to explain to everyone what exactly I know. It's the most perplexing thing ever. I try using movies, I try using literature, I try using illustrations. It's still not enough. It's almost as if I have to create something new in order to try to explain it a certain way. It's like words can't do it. Images can't do it. Analogies, kind of. Parables, maybe. I think that's the entire premise of the whole Gnosticism way back then. And, of course, all the secret societies and stuff like that, where they'll tell you the hidden meaning of all things. They don't even know because they can't experience it. They can only pass on what was some people would just passed on. And then, of course, torture never works quite right. So it's not like they're going to gain anything from it. And then here's the funny part. Is everyone that tries to find out or wants to find out by listening to people like other people, everyone can experience it themselves. They can find out themselves. They don't have to rely on anyone else. You can rely on yourself to know, actually. You can. It's simple. It's easy. Everyone's explained how they can do it. It is... I'd say, yeah, maybe people may not be ready for it, but I think when you are ready for it, you're ready for it, even when you're not ready for it. Gosh, I keep doing that. Let's see. I'm just looking at chat. Yeah, let me go back to chat. Let's see. Hey, you go play Naked. I don't really think it is. Report from co-op, a bond you're missing out. God is an algebraic answer based on a lot of past wisdom. Eagle plane anchors, they refer to God as the creator. Well, the demiurge is just called the creator too. So, we might want to get a little bit more variable on our terms. There in Gale, when Thutmose the Fourth revealed the secrets of the inner cult to the commoners of Egypt, they rejected it and drove them from the country, and the priest class went back to the outer cult practices. Yeah, we do see a lot of that. But that's not the fault of the commoners. It's because that they've been taught incorrectly for such a long time. They don't want to acknowledge the fact that they've been lied to for such a very long time. Some people can handle that. A lot of people cannot. Let's see. We need critical thinking. 5 minutes ago. Back to the beginning. Yeah, it is a good show. So, don't know what else. I mean, if people want to come on in, you guys can come in and talk for a little bit. The information is in the description box as always. And let's see. No one's joined yet. And I'd say I'll go on for another 8 minutes or so. Again, that little documentary I have is kind of a work in progress, but it's a slow work in progress. Again, it doesn't matter what I seem to use. I won't explain it very well. I just have to keep trying. I think the game that I have might be able to help, but it's just another medium where I can't explain the intangibles. I can't measure the immeasurable. It doesn't let's see. I mean, there's just a lot. Just like quotes that I even get from movies, even like Quentin Tarantino movies. It was The Hateful Eight. I didn't even watch the whole thing, but it reminds me of one of the sayings like, "And no one ever said it had to be easy." And then I think another character goes, "Well, no one said it had to be so hard." Right? I think a lot of people make it a little bit harder on themselves, and seek an easy escape outward. I'm guilty of it because there's multiple sides, I guess, to every individual, right? A lot of us want for certain reasons, and want for others. But one thing we may need to want to do is step back and have people want for themselves rather than try to want for others, and understanding what others want, type of thing. And just take that step back and just wait it out. It's like, if people don't know what they want, they don't know what they want. Whatever you give them, they don't know if they want that even. So don't even worry about it. I think that's also kind of the problem that we get as society, as culture. We expect that a certain want is best for everyone, not letting individuals want for themselves. And thus we get into this entire political or very antagonistic type of system, which we feed and perpetuate, and then it further divides everybody. And we go, hey, if we just had this, it just make things better for everybody. And that can be a problem. Port Film Co-op. It was fine. I could hear you just fine. I would say if you call in, test out your mic. That's the way to do it, right? We won't know just by thinking it may or may not. We would never know until it does. Theron Gale. Also, I really like that quote. I used to care way more about culture war stuff, but now I'm just like, is that clown? I don't know what that means. I'm not very good at that. The emojis. Any zombie TV shows you like, Ibon, or anyone here? I like Z Nation. It's effing hilarious and imaginative. What's Never to Call from Australia again? Let me find that. I mean, Walking Dead, Fear the Walking Dead, but that's just because we just spent so much time watching it, me and my wife, that we just keep watching it. I haven't liked it for a while now, but it's just one of those things where I just will keep watching. So that one, I did watch some of Z Nation. Again, it's with the wife, so if she can't watch it, I don't skip ahead. I'll see if she. I mean, I could just binge watch it. Metalhead, what are you doing? What am I doing? And let's see. Oh, there's some big spiders I got in this basement. I tell you that. I think they're a little bit confused. I don't know. I'm a little bit confused too. Just to let you know. Up to no good as usual. I don't know. Am I up to no bad? Is it no as an N-O or K-N-O-W? Can you know good? Can you know bad? Or is it just no good or no bad? But can there be no good? How can one be up to no good? Hi, Kathy B. How's it going? All right. I'll wait a little bit more to see if Port Film Co-op comes on in. Yeah, the answer is simple. The question on how to get there, that remains to be seen. I think that's kind of the entire point, and that's the answer. That's the point. It's not necessarily finding out the questions and the answers. It's figuring it all out. That's the point. If we start off with the answer and we run through it and we go, well, we got there, but I can't remember how we got there. It's like, all right, then what do? We have to go in reverse. Maybe we'll go backwards and retrace our footsteps or whatever, figure a way back to how to get back here. And it's the same thing. Imagine just how timing seems to fit, right? I'm not sure if any of you are married and are still married, but imagine if you met your spouse 10 years earlier or 10 years later. Things would not be the same. Or you met at a different time in your life, and same thing with your spouse. I mean, everything will be a lot different. And let's see. Just one easy, simple decision in your life changes pretty much everything. And that spider is going crazy on that web. I don't know what to do with these spiders. One thing, right? See, here's the thing. Spiders, they can be a nuisance. They got all these cobwebs and stuff all over the place. But you know what? I don't have to kill as much flies. They can go ahead and eat the flies. But then there's just dead flies all over the place and spider webs. Or I could have flies and maggots. Either way, it kind of sucks. Oh, meeting ID. Sorry. Meeting ID is there. I'll go and put that in there for you. And let's see. I think that's the thing. I think we think too much. We don't need to think too much. It really doesn't really matter. I mean, it matters a lot, but it also doesn't matter. It's I think it's maybe more about worry. We worry too much. And is the worriness needed? I mean, if you act to make a decision, regardless of the outcome, but hoping for an outcome that you want, and that's what planning, strategy, and thinking and all that is, but it's not worrying. Worrying prevents you from action. Because basically all you're going to do is worry, because if you act one way or another, you're going to get a result that you're not exactly sure you're going to get the that you want. Hold on.
Hello?
Yep, how's it going?
Hey man, how are you?
Good, how about yourself?
I've had about 1 hour's sleep, and I was chronically depressed yesterday. So I'm doing this on a whim, and not sure what we will discuss, but I'm here.
All right. Well, are you having trouble sleeping? Or you just...
Yeah, I did have trouble sleeping, and then I woke up early and couldn't get back to sleep.
Okay.
I have a lot of life pressures at the moment.
Okay.
Family things, and also I'm making a movie, and it's killing me.
Yeah, I can understand that, but I don't know how I'll help you. Maybe I won't. Maybe I think you'll figure it out.
Yes, I'm actually pretty good today. I actually want to point that out. I'm feeling all right today. I'm just a bit tired.
Yeah.
But One thing I wanted to say about the your anti-religious zealotry is the opposite argument can quite as easily be made. I agree with you that religion has been used as a form of control, totally. But we now live in an age where our religion is being taken away from us and our traditions are being taken away from us and are being seen as evil because there's a new religion of, a sort of modern incarnation of Marxism, I suppose, almost like a cyber Marxism. So I think you can just as easily make the argument both ways, and I don't think there is a clear answer.
What about not having any religion or having? I mean, of course, as far as the United States, just the freedom to practice any religion you want, that's fine. But I think we've gotten to the point where a lot of this religion has been intertwined within culture, so it's hard to get away from religion. And a lot of kids kind of who grew up in a religious home, they kind of understand how how difficult it is to get away from religion, especially when it's intertwined within their personal lives and their family and the culture that they grew up in.
Yeah, you could take a sort of Jordan Peterson sort of argument where he's really an atheist, but he can see the virtues in religion. I certainly see a correlation with the decline of religion in the West, with a decline of the West itself, because as you say, it is entangled. So it's all very well to say we are free to do what we like, but we need to know that we are essentially destroying our civilization in the process. We just need to be conscious of that. And I'll give you maybe an example of, let's look at the most progressive country in the world, which might be Sweden. Order will return there. They're in a situation where they've got a spate of a hand grenade crisis over there, right? Order will return there, but it will return through Islam because their demographics are changing so quickly, and you have a very aggressive and homogenous group coming in who do not have a declining birth rate and are, having 5 to 8 children per marriage, and order will return, but unfortunately it will be to the loss of the previous civilization. So in that sort of practical, I agree with you. Yeah, it's entangled with the civilization, and I don't feel the need to entangle it. I think that that there's something to be said have something passed on to you and for you to continue the traditions. I think that's a form of wisdom, particularly if it's worked. Families staying together shouldn't be such a luxury, but now it is. We have such family breakdown. You have all these, men committing suicide, and you have such radical social change. Are you a fan of all this social change, or do you see it as destructive, or how do you feel? Because it's very interesting hearing atheists on one hand have a great problem with religion, but then they don't like the results of the vacuum that an absence of religion has created, and the problems and new revolutions that you get because of that. I find that they don't really have a strangely, I don't think they have a coherent argument. I think it's a sort of a bit fantasist and Randian.
Oh, it's fine. I'm not an atheist. I'm at most agnostic, but also Gnostic. I'm a little bit all over the place. A lot of it kind of stretches into Taoism and like Vedic Hinduism, and a lot of it just kind of crosses boundaries. But the idea of the family breakdown is we've gotten to the point where religion isn't passed on from the parent to the child. Religion is where the family goes together to go into some building where some person teaches some part of some scripture, and everyone else
Yes.
from different families all join in listening on the same thing. It's not personal. It's not based off of experiences, especially spiritual ones from the parents to, and maybe their ancestors to their sons and daughters. And I think a lot of that is that's passed down is just the freedom to explore the spirituality, the different religions that are out there, what's there to be found. And a lot of people who go through these religious ordeals in their childhood, that's the one religion that they say is the right religion. It just happened to be that first religion that they grew up under. They go, oh, no. That religion over there that person learned in that country or that state or city, that's the wrong religion. But I'm going to go and explain to that person and people over there that that's the wrong religion. This is the right one, and here's why. And they don't ever explore the entire religion of the other side. But then, there are a lot of individuals who grow up in non-religious families, and they get to explore all the different religions. I was very big into finding a religion to be a part of, because I felt that being in some type of religion is just a way to find like-minded individuals. And it might be a little bit easier on me if I found a religion and had a life within that religion and have like a network type of thing. I think I explored when I was 19 and 20, and probably again maybe when I was 23 to 24. I couldn't find one.
Can I quickly ask you? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I just couldn't find one. I mean, there are ones that I thought some were great, some weren't. I mean, they all seem to have some good and bad parts, but at the end of the day, it's like, I'm not sold on any religion, so I'm not going to buy into it. I'm not going to change. Now, the experience that I've had last couple months, but it's still not a religion. It's just an experience, a wisdom that's gained, an insight. And I wish that my parents passed down something like that to me. Unfortunately, that's not the case, and that's not the case for a lot of people in this world.
That's what I actually wanted to ask. I wanted to know what your upbringing is, and you've sort of answered my question. And I was also going to... The filmmaker Paul Schrader, he's a very interesting guy. He's a script writer as well. He grew up, I think, a Dutch Reformed or a Dutch Calvinist, which is quite strict. And I mean, he's pretty open about it. You can't escape your early programming. It really is who you are, and we can move on from that. But it is, if you are brought up a certain way, it is sort of fundamental to who you are, and that goes for atheists too. It change is hard. Otherwise, we would be different people every day. Change is a sort of paradox in a way. Otherwise, we would change our opinions all the time. There's a reason why we, for the most part, stay the same. Some changes are gradual. There is always the chance of a radical change, but it's usually tough and it's hard work and requires a lot of effort. I'm very grateful for having been brought up in the Anglican Church in Australia, which I guess you guys call Episcopal or something in America. I'm grateful for that, but also through a sort of oral tradition through my mother. What my mum tells me from her experience is important to me, and I would say a lot of it is through that oral tradition. I haven't really read the Bible before, so it's mostly anecdotal, oral, and observational. That the things I've enjoyed about my society often have a Christian basis, and I'm not really critical of other religions, except really Marxism. which is that's the one I really have the most problem with because of what's happening at the moment. But I respect Islam. I envy it in many ways. I envy its homogeneity and the passion and pride that the people have. Look, there's problems with it, but it's in many ways none of my business to criticize. However, I don't want to create a vacuum for another civilization to take over, and nobody wants that, So look, faith is a really complex thing. There's no doubt about it. I struggle with it, but I'm not anti-religion, and I can kind of admire almost everyone. I must say though that I think that so much of the problems we have, it's funny. Some people see all the problems coming from religion, and to me, it's like no, all the problems we have are coming from atheism. So there's two sides of the coin. There's two stories here, but I'm very grateful for the goodness that's in my mother, and that she was in a mental institution when I was very small, and it was a chaplain there that she was suicidal. Like she wanted to kill herself. And I was already born at that stage, and I wasn't with her. I was a very small child, and a chaplain, she said she was nothing, she was worthless, and all it took was for the chaplain to tell her that that's not true, and that Jesus does think you're worth something, and that got her through, and that got me to see my mother again. So sounds like a silly story, but I will not be throwing it away. Because of my atheist friends' arguments that they're just taking from a Dawkins book. They always say the same thing: a magical teapot, or they was the same mumbo jumbo, logical fallacy, all these kind of the same buzzwords. It just doesn't work for me anymore. I can see what's happening to my own civilization. We're murdering babies and we've become very anti-maternal. I think that moving away from the traditional roles is not working. And from the male side of things, I think that it really does explain the very high suicide rates. Partly because I think men are quite innately good at mathematics, and we know not only is this not going to work for us as individuals, it's not going to work for the whole society. And what it feels like, it's like being in a slow motion car crash. And that's like a sustained pain. And that's the reason why people with terminal illnesses have euthanasia, because it's like a sustained pain. So that's what I feel. It's both a very practical, everyday experience, but it's also just it's come from my mother. It's come from my upbringing. I'm grateful for it. I have no regrets. I only went to church up until the age of 10, but that's all I needed to keep me safe when I moved out of home and I was surrounded by meth addicts. That's the stuff that made me never try meth.
Mm-hmm.
Many of those friends are dead. I'm a lucky man. I'm a lucky man, and I'm not going to throw that away.
Yeah. Well, I tend to lump atheists into religion as well. There's plenty of control mechanisms through atheism and
Sure.
Science without religion, or science without God, I guess you could say. I still regard it as religion, and I don't think it should be in any religion's say that another religion or one's way of life should be dictated by some religion out there, whether it's Christianity or Islam or what have you. And look, I'm pretty sure you would be thinking the same way if all of a sudden, say, Saudi Arabia decided to take over Australia and convert everyone there to Islam. You'd be like,
well, yeah, I'm not a fundamentalist, and we don't actually have a lot of fundamentalist Christianity in Australia. It's quite because we were a British colony. It's really a mixture of Anglicans, which is the Church of England, and Catholicism. Now there is a little bit of well, actually, I would say that the more active, thriving church are the sort of Pentecostal and evangelical churches, which are more American, but people's backgrounds tend to be either Catholic or when we say Protestant, we usually mean Anglican. It means Anglican, and both are very diminished in power and really created quite a civil society. We've never really been a fundamentalist one. So I'm not telling people how to live. I'm just saying,
Yeah.
I'm defending my rights to be religious, but I'm also defending my right to point out why I think that there is a societal decline.
Sure.
And you know,
all I'm trying to state is that the ones who are within a religion and the influence of the religion, that's a different story. But then there are those who are in charge of the religion. They don't see things the same way as you, unfortunately. I'm sure the Church of England and the Catholic Church and they've acted in a lot in the past, and they probably still do a certain way in order to convert a lot of people, a lot of indigenous people as well, when they've gone to other lands, conquered whatever, what have you, and make it easier on those who do convert rather than those who don't. But the religion in itself, as far as the people who practice it, that's something I would say that's apart from the religion, as opposed to those who are heads of those organizations. They don't practice the same way that you practice. They don't what's that term? They don't practice what they preach either.
Because I think it's very diverse, and I think that from a Christian point of view, we're all sinners, and nobody's perfect. Yes, I think that there has been a failure of the church. I totally believe that. I think in many ways it's corrupt. I agree. I'm not a Catholic, but I must say I've been really drawn to E. Michael Jones. What do you think of E. Michael Jones? Are you familiar with him?
No, I am not.
He's a Catholic intellectual who's sort of been seen as a bit of an alternative to those a little bored with Jordan Peterson, he makes some very compelling arguments as to the way that things are. I'll put it that way.
Well, one of the things, like I did notice when you were mentioning just a lot of men who are feeling suicidal and stuff like that, and do you wonder? I mean, because of the societal changes, is that what you're saying? That they're relegated to being what a stay-at-home male or something? Like,
oh, look, I think that there's been a lot of rapid change, and I suppose women have been more ascendant and more empowered, maybe without the same kind of accountability. Like, I think that men are sort of built to climb a hierarchy. And now that the hierarchy is kind of rigged a little, and that, men are seen as bad, and look, I work in the arts in Australia, so that's an incredibly feminist and socialist scene. And so by default, before I even say anything, I'm already a villain in that narrative. So I can only say my experience, that it's been very hard to navigate that hierarchy, because it's far more political now than it's sort of meritocracy, and the objectives are very political, and because we're in a very polarized age, it's quite a radical politics. The arts have almost always been leftist in Australia, but now, because we're in this sort of very polarized age, they take very firm issues on every position in the culture war, and therefore you have to conform. you know, it hurts to do that when you feel in your heart that it's wrong on certain issues. So there's that. There's, you know, yeah, I mean, it's in many ways because of so much technological progress. Men are obsolete. You know, women can just get power by getting a four-wheel drive. You know, like they're the people that are buying all these four-wheel drives. They're women, and they don't go in the outback or anything. These are just for cruising city streets. You know, power and I'll give you an example. I feel that when a man gets a job, it's partly to be attractive and to be a provider. But when a woman gets a job, it's very often to be independent. Those are two fundamentally different things. And I think that, yeah, I think that there's, look, I mean, half the population is on the pill. Like, that's fundamentally changing them, whereas men are not on any kind of pill changing our hormones. And look, there's all kinds of change happening, man. It's sometimes it's hard to pinpoint. I would just say it's many movements away from tradition, both in terms of technology and how we live our lives and all those things. And I mean, there's a sense of hopelessness in men now. They're, you know, living in fear that if they hit on a girl, that they'll be charged with sexual assault and many things. Many things. It's what the media is telling us. Look, it's hard to pinpoint. I mean, why do you think that there's such high rates of male suicide?
I'd say failure to adapt. They're too focused on what they've been raised to do within society, and when that society changes, they're not able to change along with it. And just to keep it simple, I mean, my wife is the provider, and that's fine with me. I get to stay home. I get to hang out with the kids. I still have lots of things that I'm able to do, and I still am a provider. I mean, if you think about it, in a lot of ancient societies and traditions, males have been the provider for getting the raw material. After they get the raw material, the women take care of everything else. They do the cooking, they do the knitting, they do whatever it is after they get the raw material. I mean, the males, we just go out there and get it. If the women want to go out there and get it, hey, then we can go ahead and figure things out. And I'm not
sure. Can I just make one point of what you said? I think this is important. You're quite lucky in that situation, because do you know that statistically, women almost always divorce men who earn less financially than them?
Well, I guess. But I mean, if I wanted to just go back into the system and just earn money, I can. It's not like that's out of.
No, sure, but I'm just making the point that others in that situation, it doesn't always work out for.
Yeah.
In fact, it very often doesn't, and that is a. When I say that they divorce, that's women will divorce the man who earns less than them. That is a statistical truth.
Sure. Okay. But I mean, it all matters depending on the partner that you find. And I'm lucky, I guess. I mean,
yeah. That's why I said you're lucky.
Okay. But still, just adaptability. There are also men who would divorce to not be in that situation, you know? So it's just flexibility of just between, I mean, that's why it's a marriage. It's between two people. Or you both have to make decisions for what's best and what each are willing to do and take part of. And me, I actually appreciate being able to spend more time with the kids and, you know, have my daughter and my son grow up with me, rather than with the school, you know, rather than the after school program. And I always leave that out there for my daughter. She's 6. I go, "Are you sure you don't want to do the after school program?" She's like, "No, she just wants to hang out with me." And I think
that's great.
Yeah. And I mean, it's something that I really didn't get a chance to do with my father or my mother. They're just not. I mean, it's just it's pretty much grew up in the system. You could just say that.
Can I just say something that popped in my head, and it's just a theory, and I could be very, very wrong.
You don't even have to ask. You can just say it, you know.
Okay. Because you talked about a failure to adapt, and I must say, I think I've failed to adapt. I really do. There's also another statistical point that people are having their children much, much later than they used to, and that's happened increasingly so over the years. Mm-hmm. And one of the risks in having children much later are certain things like autism. Autism, I'm autistic, I think, right? And my mum had me at 40, which was quite rare at the time. But by people having children later in life and a higher risk of being in the autistic spectrum, it then might create a sort of failure to adapt in a sense.
Could be. I think it's. I don't know. I think it may be more of just a mentality. It would just change. For me, it's always just been about adapting to the situations rather than having to, because trying to get the situation to adapt to me, which is almost an impossibility. It's a lot harder to do, and you know, just all those little terminologies like I just go with the flow type of thing. You know, just take it back, take it easy. You know, things happen. If they happen and it's out of your control, look, it's out of your control. You make the best of it with what you can. And if it's too hard, change the scenario. Move to a different place. Start over. Do something else. And it's just I think part of the problem with a lot of the change is that there really isn't alternatives set up for those who take the adjustment too slowly. Because it's no matter which culture you're in, it's always a fast moving system. You know, they want to go ahead and adapt this and put it in motion and have people adjust to it, and it's then you move on to the next thing. I think good thing with the bad government is that the bureaucracy gets really, really bogged down and changes are slow. So cultural changes in effect are also slow. So that's kind of a good thing. But the thing is, a lot of people have just stopped and haven't really formed organizations in which to still stay in just kind of that outskirt area without having to fully move in. You know, whether it's religion or spirituality or just the upbringing traditions of a country or city or whatever. I mean, I think a lot of people just need to kind of stick together, but you know, it's gotten to the point where rather than sticking together, it's every man for themselves type of thing. And that's where we don't even see an alternative.
There really feels like, there really does feel like there's an erosion in community and connection. I certainly feel, I mean, you know, I'm speaking to you in the United States rather than my neighbor. Mm-hmm. You know, that's what it's like now, and increasingly so. And it's difficult when you're in it and it's had that impact to then go, oh, okay, let's change, and you don't know what to change to. Or also, what if you have a problem with how you see the world and you don't want to conform to that? You know, that makes you an outsider. That makes you difficult.
You know, you're talking to a flat earther here. So
for real?
Yeah, you didn't know that?
Oh, really? No, I didn't know that. No.
Oh, okay. Well, I count myself a flat earther because it's most likely flat than it is globe, but I still wouldn't know either way. I just leave it at that.
What is the moon? I was just thinking about that. I spoke to my housemate earlier today about how we only see one side of the moon, so it could be like a flat coin for all we know.
Yeah, it could be. I don't know. But part of the fun
Did
part
we
is
go
not
there?
knowing. I think it's more amazing to not know than it is to assume that you know when you really don't as well. Just because someone else you talk to is more confident about what something is doesn't necessarily mean that they're right. They're just confident about what they don't know.
Absolutely. But yeah, well, sorry, I don't think I've ever spoken to anybody who's a flat earther before, so this is a very new experience.
Don't worry about it. There might be more than you think.
Oh no, I'm not worried about it. I'm intrigued. But what? So, did you not grow up with any kind of religious tradition from your parents? That there wasn't anything. And are they from Korea or?
My parents, they came from South Korea. They had I wonder if it's Confucius. I'm not quite sure, but they did have a kind of a tradition of like an ancestry. I don't know if it's just South Korean or if it's religious at all. But once I turned a certain age and my father started to speak better English, I think they went to church on Sundays. I don't know what it was, but it didn't last long for me. I think I got baptized and that was it, because I just raised too much of a fuss while in the service in the Sunday worship, whatever. And so I never went. My father stopped going. My mother stopped going. So that was pretty much it. And I mean, I've always that was as close to religion as I got. And growing up, I always
good
had
experience, bad experience.
Bad experience in what way?
Oh, I said, was it a good experience or a bad experience?
The Sunday church thing was a bad experience. I think.
Why's that?
It was boring, and as a kid, there's just a lot of rituals going on, and we got no idea what the heck it is. And then basically, we ask a question. They tell you, well, you're not supposed to ask those types of questions. Here, this is what all you need to know, and that's it. And so as a kid, we're always wondering why, right? And I let my daughter just ask as many questions as she can, and I'm okay with it. But I won't tell her.
What kind of church was that?
I don't know.
Was it like a particularly strict one, or?
Can't remember. Whatever's big in Houston, Texas, I guess. I mean, this is when I was really young. I think I was like 3 or 4, and then like I think 5 might have been my last time as a kid actually going to a church like that. And I think it was great. It led me to explore a lot of different religions, and you know, people like I was kind of like a straight shooter as a kid, and like I just really have this moral standard things that I would just do. I would be like the, you know, listen to the government type of thing, even though I was kind of a rebel. You know, I would still do good things, nice things, and you know, the assumption that people who didn't believe in God or immoral or whatever is like, what are you talking about? I don't believe in, well, like back then, I don't believe in your God or that God or whatever. And you know, I'm not the one doing all this shoddy stuff. It's like, hey, I know that kid over there. He goes to church. He's that God. You know what that guy does? It's like, I'll tell you what that guy does. He has sex with a lot of women. A lot of those women are underage, and you know, this is like high school and whatever. So it's like, you know, I would say it really is about the person, not necessarily what your religion is. There are people who are very religious, especially you can see in the Catholic Church, even the ones who are doing the preaching, the cardinals, whatever, and there are scandals all over the place with pedophilia and things like that. And So really, it's the individual, not your.
That's really the one thing stopping me from exploring Catholicism, is that issue, and otherwise I think I would gravitate towards it. I quite like the very little that I know about Eastern Orthodox. I like it aesthetically. I like the art, and I'm a big fan. I think I mentioned this last time I spoke on this stream. The films of Andrei Tarkovsky. I think he's the greatest filmmaker ever, and the films he made in the Soviet Union, which were kind of permeated with Orthodox symbolism and feelings. One of the things that brought me back to Christianity, because they're just so powerful, and not in always a very literal, straightforward way, because as I said, they were made in an atheist, communist regime, and he had to be quite subtle about it. And even then, his films were suppressed, and he was ultimately exiled and died quite young. I guess because I'm a filmmaker and an artist, that the artistic myth and the sort of heroic artistic myth and suffering is important to me, and I guess that kind of mimics the kind of Christ story. So, but I just recommend you check. Have you ever seen any of the films of Andrei Tarkovsky, particularly Stalker? Have you ever seen?
No, I haven't. I'll try checking them out. Is he? What year were the films that he made in?
The first would have been the mid to late '60s. It's a film called Ivan's Childhood, and then I'd say his last film would have been in the early to mid '80s. He only made, I think, 7 or 8 films, and his I think his first film, is a shot up the top of this tree, and it tracks down to the ground, or the reverse. And then the final moment, I think, of his last film is the reverse shot of that tree. It's just bookended by this the same shot.
Yeah, I'm seeing some images now. Yeah, a lot of contrasting imagery.
Yeah, they're very slow, absorbing, challenging stuff that a lot of people get bored with. But they take a bit of effort to watch, a bit like sitting in church when you're young. But I would say check out Stalker first, and then you'll realize, wow, I've seen this ripped off 1,000 times. Okay. And yeah, it's a sort of bit of a post-apocalyptic film, actually. It's a sci-fi film, but it's such a meditation on things that, it's not a conventional sci-fi film. He made the original Solaris, which was remade by Soderbergh.
Okay. Yeah, I saw the Soderbergh one.
Decades later.
Check those out.
Oh, I think they're amazing, and all I ask is if you watch one, you sit down and you watch the whole thing. You can't pause it. You can't do anything like that. And if you're not willing to sit down and do that, don't press play. Just leave it for another time. Because Stalker, he had to shoot that film 3 times. And it was filmed on toxic locations, and many of the cast and crew, including the director, died quite young, probably from being on these Soviet, very toxic industrial, locations, filming in rivers and creeks that are just filled with, effluent from different factories and things. But,
yeah, a lot of that went on everywhere.
What got you into this flat Earth business?
I mean, there's nothing that was left untouched as far as me looking into conspiracy theories and stuff like that. So, I went to go ahead and look at it, and it wasn't any flat earther. Like, I talked with Mark Sargent. I looked at videos from like Eric DeBay and a whole bunch of flat earther material, and it's like, I'm not convinced. And then I was watching a show called Genius by Stephen Hawking. Stephen Hawking is a famous scientist, mathematician. And so, I was like, all right, this is good. It's like public broadcasting, PBS, maybe it's not as mainstream. And so it was first season, episode 6, I think it was, and I watched all the way through, of that entire season. There's the last season, and there's one where they're doing measurements to see if there's any curvature, and they used the one where ships over the horizon disappear, parts of it not fully, therefore proving way back from Eratosthenes back in the 500 BCs that the Earth was proved a globe. But then there's been a lot of videos with people with Nikon P900s or something like that where they can zoom in and you see the ships not really going over the horizon. Anyways, there's a part where instead of using ships, they used a helicopter, and you could just with the helicopter on one scene goes down over the horizon, so it looks like, okay, it is a globe. Then there's another shot which is almost like a half second long where the helicopter is going above the horizon. But then what I noticed, and what others noticed as well, is that they shot over the water with 3 birds flying across the screen horizontally. And so I just compared those images, took snapshots, and they're the exact same 3 birds, exact same position, going horizontally. So obviously they faked that result, whether it's the helicopter going down, helicopter going up, or both. But they're just reusing the same shot with the same 3 birds going across the screen. So I was like, all right, if they faked it, I'm just going to go ahead and assume that the globe, the entire, there's just a lot of questions with the moon landings in the first place anyway. And so I was like, all right, I don't think I can't trust these people if they have to fake results. I don't trust any scientific experiment where the results get faked. I'm sorry. If that's unscientific for people, then they're the ones that are unscientific, because you don't fake results in a science experiment. Case closed. So that kind of got me into it, and then just the whole other world out there when you start perceiving things as not what the systems of control say they are. And there's plenty of corruption and lies that systems of control have, whether it's government or religion. And that's why when I say religion, it's just a control mechanism of religion, not necessarily those who believe in it. They're the ones, like the preacher who's asking for everybody to pay for $1 million private jet, or the Catholic Pope who has billions, if not trillions, of money within the Vatican. And what's the point of all that money if they're not going to use it when the world seems to get worse and they just seem to get richer and richer, and things like that. Same thing with the government and so anyways, kind of just stepping back, seeing how it all is, and it's like, okay, now if the Earth is flat, let's look at things where people thought a different way of what things could be. Who are some good philosophers who used to think a certain way before it was pitched to everybody that the Earth was a globe? And I start seeing, as far as Greek philosophers, Aristotle, everything is starting to be relativistic, with Einstein, and that all started with Aristotle. Everything else was pretty much objective with Socrates and Plato, and the Plato's model of the Earth was non-heliocentric. And so I start to be going more into the Plato philosophy, and a lot of that also kind of converges with Gnosticism in a little bit, and Gnosticism also kind of mixes in and has similarities with Taoism, and it starts to get pretty interesting with that. And then of course there's all these psychedelics. It's like, all right, I didn't know there's such a thing as ayahuasca. I was listening to someone about ayahuasca and a couple other psychedelics and things like that. And it's like, wow, I didn't even know that there was such things like that. Really, we can experience it. So I did ayahuasca once, twice, and 3 times. 3 times, that was it. And just a whole different perception, experience of things that are going on, and how certain things just are kind of imagined. It's like the threat seems there, but the the final push isn't, so I start to question, like, is it because I know now that they don't mess with me, or like, what is it that's going on right now? It's like, shouldn't they want to mess with me more because I seem to know certain things? But
what do you mean? As in authorities?
It's just things that you would expect to happen to you, but doesn't. And it's.
Do you think it's like two possible scenarios there? Firstly, do you think it's possible that you're wrong and therefore you're not a threat to anything, or B, that there's so many people spread out that feel that way, that might have streams, they might have blogs, but they're so easy to discredit, at least from their point of view, that it's not really seen as a threat. And if anything, it's a bit of a divide and conquer. It's perfectly fine that people feel different ways about these sorts of things, because there can be no coherent movement of any kind to really attack power structures and things. I think that like strategy is so complex that I think it's very hard to untangle the potentials of military strategy and things. So. So there's a couple of options there. What do you think of those options?
Like, I would say I am a strategist, but at this point, I just wait and see. It's like I'm waiting for them to make the move. I've got ideas of what I could do, but basically, it's just going to be based on the situation, and then I guess that's that. So I don't really worry. So that's kind of the part of this thing, is like, when you worry, you don't act. You just sit there contemplating about how to act. And the thing is, what one shouldn't do is worry. Just live as though the situation that you're perceiving that may happen occurs. Don't even put that into your equation during the day. And if it happens, well, you've got kind of an idea, but you're not. You just pick and choose as the situation progresses. One of the things that I like to mention a lot is either with martial arts, or there's a movie called Crimson Tide. It's just kind of a way of preparation. It's in Crimson Tide, it's a movie with Denzel Washington and Gene Hackman. Gene Hackman is
Tony Scott. Yeah, I'm a big Tony Scott fan. I think he's a fabulous visual stylist. But sorry, keep going.
Music was good, acting was good, writing was good. Anyways, Gene Hackman, during the submarine, they're under, and there's a fire in the kitchen, and he uses that moment to run a readiness drill, in case they need to be all hands on deck to, if there's like an enemy submarine approaching or whatever. And then Denzel Washington's like, no, we're risking, we're jeopardizing the crew and the mission just because of a drill. We should put out the fire, then have the drill. But then, see, Gene Hackman's idea is, well, we won't ever have, in a war situation, everything going perfect. We need to be prepared for things that we're not prepared for, and this is one of them. There's a fire and in the kitchen, and we've got a threat on our hands, so we got to be prepared to handle both. So I think back when I was younger, when I watched the movie in the first place, I was more like Denzel Washington. Take the safe approach. The mission is more important, but then I have changed to be more like Gene Hackman. It's like, look, if we do survive the kitchen fire, but the men aren't prepared for any situation that comes up that's in a chaotic situation, then no matter what, we're never going to fulfill that mission in the first place. And the same thing with martial arts, when there's a lot of very systematic martial arts where when one person throws, say, just a normal punch, you've got, maybe 3 methods of how to counter it and deal with the situation. And then you just pretty much get into memory. So when that situation comes up, you just do those three moves or one of those three moves. But I think the better way to train is not to use anything that you have that you've trained for. Just have a variety of just not one person throwing a punch. Maybe they'll punch and then they'll kick at the same time, or they'll punch and then they'll try to grab you, or they'll punch and then they'll just things that a person could do is something that you can't prepare for. For example, is like, I mean, when you're in a fight, not everyone's just gonna come at you with just that one punch. They may come at you just trying to tackle you, or they may come at you with just a kick, or they might just come at you and just like throwing a couple of things and then just throwing some punches and just wild. It's not going to be just a simple reaction solution. You just got to be prepared for.
Life is not Aikido.
Yeah. But it's just kind of the same thing. We're at the very beginning. The answer is it 1 + 2, and then it's just a simple 3, or is it just a 3 in any way you can get to that 3? So that whatever happens, my end result is to hopefully get away without any harm, with me still being with my family, and everyone just finding a way to resolve the differences peacefully.
So basically, you believe in a mixture of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and Muay Thai.
It's like Jeet Kune Do, I guess, just kind of like how Bruce Lee had it. Take what you have from one that's useful, and then if you don't need anything else, move on to the next thing that you could use that's useful. I mean, my body type is not going to be the same as someone who's 6'4" and 230 pounds. I'm 5'8" and 185. Same thing with someone who's maybe 5'4" and 136 pounds. It's what's useful for them for any combat situation is going to be different than me and the bigger person. So it's I think one of the things that me and my brother we talked about a lot is how a lot of systems, whether it's schooling or martial arts, a lot of it's very robotic. Like you've got 30 people filled in a classroom all learning the same thing, rather than having like a one-on-one like a mentor student relationship where you could focus on a lot of different things and a lot of variabilities, different types of training. Another thing in society that we don't have is the like an electrician. How there used to be a lot more where you have a trade and you have a student that learns for a couple years and until they're able to do it on their own. That was something great, and that we no longer have very much.
I do think that Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu does tend to work a bit that way, though. In the little bit that I've done, I find that the first half of the class, you're doing these exercises on the ground, different grappling, things, right? Mm-hmm. But then usually for the rest of the day, firstly, before I get to the second part, if you're a beginner, someone who is above you in experience, immediately acts like a teacher because it's part of the culture, and so it's very, very good in that sense. And then the second half is pure sparring, like pure full contact, no punching and no striking, but it's all grappling sparring, and anything can happen. And very often you will be with someone who is much better than you, and they see it as an opportunity to teach you something, that they'll actually, you might be in a good position and they will point out what you could try in that moment. If they're good, if they're a good teacher, if it's innate. It's very surprising. Like the culture within it is to constantly be creating teachers, people that can then, and it's so also it's different to the Japanese form. They are way more into it constantly evolving, And the teacher will say, when someone says a different option, they say, yes, that is good, if it is indeed good, or they show it. And it is far more flexible, and hence why it became so popular and created the Ultimate Fighting Championship, and was then absorbed into basically what we call MMA, which is really just a combination of that and Muay Thai.
Yeah.
Muay Thai probably being the best of the striking arts, the most effective of the striking arts. So it does kind of have that. I agree with you that the certain ways of teaching, of having basically a master and having a lot of exposure to that person. And I love that sort of saying, which I understand it's from somewhere in Asia, where it's if the student does not surpass the teacher, then the teacher has failed. I think it's beautiful, but I don't think we live that way anymore, because I think regulation and things have got in the way of that, because of safety. Have you ever seen that film Whiplash about the jazz drummer?
No, I don't think so.
It was a popular film, a few years ago, and it was about this aggressive teaching style where this man actually gets kicked out of the school, and he felt so misunderstood because he was trying to create geniuses, but he had learned from the old jazz days of someone playing in a club thinking that they're doing good, and then the drummer taking off a cymbal and just throwing it at them like a frisbee. And that I think they were a saxophonist or a trumpeter going home crying and being so upset because they were humiliated, but they immediately practiced the next day to become better and better and better. And I think that the real learning hurts. Like I mean, yesterday I'm depressed because I have such low organizational skills, and I'm making this movie on my own. I just got all this footage converted into a format so I can finally see it, and it was just so overwhelming and not what I thought the footage was, and I don't know what to do with it, and I felt almost like at the end of my life. But this is going to force me to learn. This is going to force me to have to adapt, and it hurts because it's like exercise. It's strenuous.
Yeah, it's also like exercise when you haven't done it in a long time. But once you get used to it, then it's just kind of easy to change what you need. Like one of the things I do with my daughter is when I train her with martial arts is I let her play with different ways to get out of something. Whether if I grasp her arm, how do you get out of that? And so I'll go ahead and time it, see how long it takes. I tell her a couple ways that I would do it, and so she could try it that way. But it's pretty much, have her find out what doesn't work, have her find out what works, and have her find out eventually maybe something that works that's better. And it's like experimenting and playing, and I think that's one of the things that we don't have a lot for people that we want to teach, to whether it's something purely based on reading, writing, arithmetic, or whatever, but that the curriculum that's given in school is there's this specific way of getting to this final answer, and you have to use that way. And they're teaching you that way, and they don't let you play around with it. It's like, hey, is there any other way to do it? And then what's funny is in the workplace, when kids get out of school, what most corporations and stuff like that, they just need people who know how to do something, because that's why they're hiring in the first place. And so in order to do something, they can't think the same way. So what they usually have are people who think outside the box. And so they come up with all these employment questions, like, how can you do this in 3 steps? And if you're kind of used to those types of questions, you can figure it out in those 3 steps. But if you're growing up and going through just a normal academic field, you're just thinking inside the box constantly. So
Yeah.
it's funny how the system is getting you prepared for something where you're not going to be useful once you're outside of the school, because what people are looking for are people who can think outside and figure things out, because
Yes.
they have people within the company that can't figure it out. That's why they're hiring.
That's a huge problem with universities in Australia, particularly with film, which is the area I'm in. I never studied, and the main university local to me, the students that come out of there are so paralyzed that they might make a few films within the film school, but once they leave, they mostly never make anything again. And because they're so institutionalized and have learned there's a certain way of making things, and you know they don't learn about YouTube there, for instance. I think YouTube is an, even though there's a lot of censorship and there's bad stuff happening, it's still the most exciting place, I think, for film. I'm not really interested in contemporary cinema, and I'm not really interested in long-form TV shows. I think YouTube has, with all the radical editing styles and things like that, is really where the most exciting film content is. And they don't even learn about it there. And so they enter a society where we don't actually have a film industry in Australia. So there's no jobs for them. And they don't learn to be entrepreneurial. So they never instigate anything. And then there's YouTube, and they don't even think of it as a legitimate form, because it's not legitimized by their course. When really, if you looked at YouTube in the context of cinema, it's come along and revived film just like it does cyclically. That's what happens. Every 20 or 30 years, there'll be somewhere that is doing something radical. But not only is it radical, but it actually captures the public's imagination. Like in the 80s, it was a lot of directors coming from advertising from England. That they revolutionized cinema, including the guy that you mentioned with Crimson Tide. He Tony Scott. I mean, he was such a visually audacious, director. Like his second film was Top Gun. Now, you probably think Top Gun's a really mainstream film, and it is in a sense. But if you actually look at the filmmaking, it's actually really avant-garde.
Yeah, I really love Top Gun. It was a great movie.
I love it. I've got the Blu-ray, and I love all the extra features. It's so I absorbed the whole thing. And you know that film wasn't working until they had to shoot pickup shots to make the story work. It wasn't working at all as a film, because all the emphasis went into getting all that shooting all that material in the sky. But then they had to do some model work, and it's amazing. And I love that intersection between experimental and avant-garde and hyper commercial. When they come together, sometimes it's really the best, because not only is it really interesting and new, but it's actually made for an audience. It's not made for an elite clique of people that pretend to like it. It really. I feel the same way about Rocky IV. I mean, that is a marvelous film in terms of the form and editing, and it was taking its style from the MTV rock videos of the time. Sorry, I'm a film obsessed person.
Don't worry, I really like film, and it's nice talking to other people who really like film, because one person in the when I was in the Navy, he was just a film buff too, and he's just always talking about the Criterion collection of films, where you can actually see a lot more about the film, plus like there's just the way that certain films come out on either DVD or Blu-ray, that they've got a lot of just a specific term he called it, artifacting and stuff. He just always point out the artifacting, and was like, I don't even notice it. I don't know what you're talking about. But like, he would pay attention to that stuff, and was like, man, I just watched the movie for the story. I'm not necessarily looking at all the technical production parts. But I agree with you. Whether a lot of industries, the traditional approach isn't working, because there's kind of a breakdown with I would say censorship. I mean, just look at the news media and journalism. Imagine coming out of university where you've got a journalism degree and you're the basics, for a long while now have been, oh, just go find a like a publication area, and New York Times, whatever. Those are the big names, and work your way from an intern and writing material, whatever it is, and so you learn. Maybe you're just gonna carry coffee or whatever. You're gonna maybe help send something like email. You're basically doing all the little basics and stuff, and then you finally get out to writing an article, and you go to the editor, and they go, "Well, no, we don't want you saying this. You can here's what you can say." And it's like, well, that pretty much, my article's not gonna go anywhere because it's just kind of drummed down and boiled down to just kind of like an ugly piece. I actually have a good vocabulary I could use and all this other stuff, and here's like the most important part of this article is what this person says, and then the editor's going, nope, we can't have what that person says say any of that. And then you go, well, my other option is to go do my own journalism on YouTube. That's an option, right? But they don't have any idea of how to work the technical stuff. It's like, I don't know how to upload. I don't know how to go live. I don't know how to, what's blockchain? When they get out of school, they're expected to work in a unit, where people will handle the technical parts. You got other people who will handle the editing, people who will handle the law part, things where you won't get trouble with, etc.
Yep.
So they're not able to do journalism on their own. But then when you realize that journalism is journalism, you could just have your own blog website and just, source everything. And you've got a following people who go, hey, this person's a journalist. It's not censored by any corporation, except they're not making any money. They just got to figure out how to make money too. But we've gotten Sorry,
it's probably censored by the platforms a bit now.
Sure.
A lot of independent journalism on YouTube, which I think some of the independent journalism on YouTube has absolutely prevented some new wars taking place. There absolutely would have been regime change in Syria if it wasn't for the YouTubers doing these really wonderful reports on the available information. Mm-hmm. The dogs of war were really barking very loudly, and that's my feeling is it was that reporting, which was getting hundreds of thousands and millions of views, that prevented more conflicts from happening. And I think that is the reason why it's been clamped down on. It really is a threat to the status quo. And that's why if you Google certain subjects, the top 30 videos will be CNN and Fox now. Yeah. So I agree, but it's not like the establishment aren't trying to deal with that situation.
Yeah.
They're used to having control. You know, when I was young, even though I'm an Australian, I wanted to get a PBS tattoo, because I used to. This is sort of before I really had regular access to the internet. I used to really like listening to those two guys, Shields and Brooks. But now I find them unlistenable. I find them so establishment, and safe. But at the time, I thought it was a radical, and I thought, oh, this is so fantastic. And you hear the Jim LBRY say, the credo of the NewsHour with Jim LBRY, which was, the first part of it is we are not here to entertain, and it felt so honourable. And I think in some ways they've done a good job, but. Gosh, I now that I've been exposed to years of the alternative media, I can barely look at that stuff. It's so it just always follows a party line. It's the establishment line, and there's things you're waiting for them to say, and they don't even bring it up. Not even as an idea, not even as a counterpoint. There's so many things that will never be discussed there.
Yeah.
But
or someone will bring up something where, all right, it's going somewhere, and then the host will go. Segue it to something totally different,
Yeah.
and we just it's just
Look, they're constrained by the format too, but just the duration and things as well.
Yeah.
You know, like that's what's wonderful about the internet, and even the kind of golden era of the Joe Rogan podcast. I think that had its place. I think it was quite radical and revolutionary. And I don't think it's that way anymore. I don't know if you know, but once upon a time it was always live, and now it's not live anymore.
Yeah. Well,
and I think that's a big difference. That's a big difference because it can be edited, it can be censored,
and
it can even.
I agree, and we have seen a lot of that. There has been, even on Joe Rogan, people have caught censorship, like that. It's not really live because someone had a hot mic before, and
yes,
they said, "Hey, look, there's a hot mic, and this wasn't on the live show. So what happened?"
Yeah, the Tim Pool, the one where Tim Pool was on there.
That's the one. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you know, once upon a time, Joe Rogan had Dr. Peter Duesberg on. I mean, that's how different it was.
Yeah.
you know the.
I don't know who he is, but the progressives on the left in the United States always talk about what's her name? Come on, people. She works on MSNBC now. Rachel Maddow. Like she was like she'd have her podcast with a couple people and she'd have really progressive views and speak what she wanted. And you can still listen to some of those now. And then you listen to her now on MSNBC and stuff. It's, oh man, totally different person. It's like,
yeah, would she get? Is she earning about $100,000 a day or something? So,
something like $30,000 a day.
Yeah.
I mean,
just
if her younger self from those podcasts knew what she was doing now, her younger self would hate her future self.
I wonder sometimes what is that? Is that biology? We get older, we change, or is it the forces around us? Because just by the way, the name that I mentioned, I brought that up. Was it Dr. Peter Duesberg? Because he's a contemporary of Kary Mullis. He's maybe the most significant age denialist that's ever lived, and so Rogan did an entire podcast with him in the sort of earlier era. Like that's how radical it was, and I know that Eddie Bravo has kind of been put in his place. Not that he's the great intellectual of conspiracy theories, but I think he's sort of been put in his place, and there was something organized apparently to talk about flat Earth on there, but Joe Rogan canceled it.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if you know about that.
Yeah, I know that. Yeah, I paid attention to that. It's not surprising. I did a little. I mean, people have done a little piece on Joe Rogan, and I've also aired it too, where he just on some show he goes, "I swear to God and my mom, if NASA tells me the truth, etc., I'll do anything, And all of a sudden he got big. He'll do anything, that's for sure. And like fame, money, all that changes person's perspective. You either see people when they hit that crossroads, they go the sellout and rich way, or they get ousted and you don't know what happens to them, or they just like end up swimming in a river somewhere where they drowned, So I guess it's an easy decision for some people, and it's also easy decision on the other way. Just are you gonna stand by your principles, or are you gonna just just choose the lesser of two evils? And the lesser of two evils is what a lot of people want. A lot of people want to live a nice, rich, wealthy life with fame and fortune. So, but if it has to, when there are principled people who get to that position, that's a more difficult choice for a lot of people.
That kind of comes full circle for me, because you talked about adapting, and in a way that you could argue that all these people are merely doing is adapting to circumstance. That when you move away from your principles, you're adapting, and I think that's one of the reasons why it's hard for people to adapt to a very modern, changing world very very radical when you have certain principles. It's difficult. I think that's my logic anyway. That's my personal feelings why I find it hard to adapt, because sometimes I feel like I'm duped into an old ideal on things sometimes, but I feel like, but that's how I feel.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I mean, we this from the 80s onto, I'd say, the now, right now. There's been so much vast changes in technology that a lot of people who are in doing good stuff with the older technology didn't want to go with the new technology, because there's a form of like, when you move on to new technology, even though it's new, you're still a couple steps back from the current technology, but you know that eventually it's going to evolve and get better. So you want to spend your time learning the new technology. So once it gets better, you're ready to switch over. What happened is that, you've got a lot of the great people who learn from the traditional ways in the older technology, and they are not able to pass down to the next generation, because the next generation is just skipping that older technology onto the new stuff. But then they're also not learning any of the good fundamentals from the people who were doing it well before. So we've got this gap where the older generation doesn't want to switch to the new technology, but you got the newer generation who doesn't want to learn the older technology and the fundamentals associated with that within the new paradigm. And so many differences.
I think that there's that, and there lies a kind of a break in lineage. Like there's a sort of schism between generations when that happens.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I would say that it happened in a values sense in the 60s and 70s. That people stopped listening to their parents and don't listen to anybody older than 30. That kind of thing. Take hallucinogenics. Have multiple sexual partners. That see marriage and religion and those things as oppressive constructs, but they in many ways created, as E. Michael Jones would say, that they're sort of enslaved by their vices, and because they were undisciplined and sort of hedonistic. Changes. Changes. Who do you think are some people? Do you think Chappelle is one of these people who, when faced with a lot of money and opportunities, that they don't sell out their principles? Who are some people that you can think of that are good examples of people that have been successful, have been given power, but haven't sold their soul in the process?
Dave Chappelle, I'm still kind of on the edge of that one, because he regrets that decision. He always says, I should have just taken the money. I mean, after all that happened, but I don't really know if he really regrets it, because if he found a different way, then I think he's okay with that. But maybe it's just...
You're referring to the Chappelle show when he walked away? Is that what you were referring to?
Yeah, because on his first Netflix series or Netflix stand-up routine that he did, he talks about that whole situation and gives a little bit more spotlight on it. And it has a lot to do with just, I guess you could say, the elite and stuff like that, what they do, just the... And we pretty much know what it's about, because we see it on the news all the time now with the pedophilia and the sex trafficking and things like that. So it's related to that, and he has a pretty interesting story to tell. That's one thing that I like about Chappelle as far as his jokes, is he's a storyteller. What you'll notice in each of his stand-up routines, he'll tie everything back together at the end with something he said at the beginning. Because he's even though he's telling jokes, he's leading up to that punchline. The punchline isn't something new; it circles all the way back to kind of where he started at the beginning. But I don't know about Dave Chappelle's situation. I just do know it's hard to find out who really has sold out or not, just because there's so much dark money these days. Like, there are some people I thought I could trust working in different activist circles. I don't know if I could trust them at all. I mean, but at any rate, I always lend out my trust until that trust is abused, and that's that. So, it's for me. I took the game theory of prisoner's dilemma, and I'm just the person who just we'll do the plus first, and then if that doesn't work, I'm never gonna trust again for that person until they change. So it's kind of that mentality, I'm always going to.
Are there some examples that you can give? Maybe some that I've heard of, because I'm not super deep into the alternative media, so I might not know every obscure character. But if there's some people you can talk about, both in terms of having integrity and perhaps people that you're a bit suspicious of.
I don't have enough evidence either way, really. I would say I would call out people for their hypocritical behavior. That's pretty much it. Whether they sold out or not, I don't have evidence one way or another. I'd have to get data on how much money they make and whatever, and certain things that they talk about or won't allow to be talked about. So I really can't name things. I mean, if you do a search of videos that I've done where it's like hypocrisy or hypocrite, you'll know who those people are. But as far as if they sold out or something like that, I don't know. I just know hypocritical behaviors. Like, hey, we're for this thing, and then I do that same thing. They're like, hey, you can't do that. And it's like, what? I thought you were for this thing. I go, no. That's totally different. It's like, how is it different? It's not different. So
you said there were some people in the alternative media that you once trusted, and maybe you're not so sure. I just wondered. You can remain tight-lipped on that if you like. It's okay. But if you have any opinions, I'm very interested.
Like I don't know for sure. Like, I just find people's decisions interesting. I could say that, whether it's cognitive dissonance, maybe, but for example, I really like Nico House, and he has his own thing, and he got really into Tulsi Gabbard, and I think he would go back and forth on Twitter with another person that I used to like, Mike Figueredo of the Humanist Report, and just because Mike Figueredo would say something critical of Tulsi Gabbard, and here for me, my whole thing is like, Nico House was good friends with Jared and Elizabeth Beck, where they did the DNC. They had that DNC lawsuit over in Florida, and Nico House was also part of it. And so he knows about the DNC fraud, yet he's very, very adamant about having Tulsi Gabbard, who's running as a DNC candidate. It's like, why is he supporting anyone who's running for the DNC when he knows how corrupt the DNC is firsthand? So I just always thought that
on the other hand, it does seem like she's being shafted. She's not allowed in the debate at the moment.
Yeah.
They've kind of used some phony reasoning with the rules to prevent her, when she's quite popular, has a kind of broad base. I guess she has the centrists and even some people on the right probably. She's a very interesting candidate. I would say she's the most threatening against Trump. I think they're crazy not to go with her if they want to win. But I can see why they don't want to do it, because she's not an establishment candidate in the same way that most of the others are. I'm not an expert, but she's certainly a bold a bold individual. You know, she went over and met with Assad. You know, that was, you know, she's been paying for that in an electoral sense ever since. But you know, she's a fascinating, you know, who do you think that the Democrats will go with in the end? What do you predict? Some people think Hillary will actually come back.
Yeah, that's what my prediction is. I predicted back in 2017, yep, Hillary Clinton would run in 2020 late, and she'd win the entire presidential election, even though it wouldn't be legitimately done.
Oh, so you think not only she will be the candidate, but she will win the election, or you know, steal the election?
Yep, steal is probably the right word for it. It's still there to see. I mean, everyone knows that whenever she runs, her favorability rating always drops the longer she runs. So if she learned anything, well, don't run early. Run as late as possible. And then you've got certain things out of her way. I mean, a big one was the emails from DNC emails, and also John Podesta emails from her campaign. But WikiLeaks is kind of no longer the problem, with Julian Assange out of the way and within imprisonment. Same thing with Chelsea Manning. So as far as like the establishment goes, they got leverage, you know. Plus they had a couple rulings, even though they weren't. They're DNC rulings, so you know they could change anytime they want. But anyone who's not running as a DNC candidate, they can't run. Certain
look at the super delegates, you know.
Yeah, they still got the super delegates. They've got I think 18 states that have passed legislation where if in a general election, if a candidate has the popular vote, that their electoral college votes will go to that candidate rather than the candidate that won from that state's electoral vote. You know, just go to the candidate. So,
is that like a popular vote as opposed to the series of counties or something?
Yes, it's the popular vote.
Okay.
So if someone wins so basically, if that means if Hillary Clinton, if she was running, if everything went exactly the same way in 2016 as it does, in 2020 as it did in 2016, she would get a lot more votes because certain states would make it so that since she won the popular vote, that the electoral college votes for those states would go to her instead. So I think at this point she would have won that election because of the legislative changes that occurred right now. And that's a thing that almost no one is talking about, which is kind of scary because I would think that the alternative media would actually do a lot more of that, but they're not.
I tend to think that Trump will still win. I'm not quite convinced that the whole electoral system is rigged. It could be, for all I know, but or they could be preparing for that. I tend to think he'll come back with a increased majority, and that he will be seen like any president who's imperfect. But I think that he'll be seen in time much more like someone like I don't know. It's hard to explain, but almost like Napoleon. He's not like any other president. He's far more of a regal figure, and I think that it's so interesting that the jury is still out on whether he's a genius or an idiot. I don't quite have the answer. I think that he is very intuitive, and is. I tend to think he's smarter than people think.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of what he's doing is long game. A lot of that could be projection of my own optimism, but people have expected a lot from him, and not all of his ambitions have been successful. But by presidential standards, I still see him as really being quite good, because he may not have entirely turned the ship around, but he stopped the ship. He's at least stopped the ship in some respect.
I'd say he reversed it in some. Okay, so we know what a dumb president is, or idiot president. That was George W. Bush. So we know
Yeah,
Trump is not George W. Bush. So I would say he's
yeah.
not really an idiot. I'd say, yeah, I think you're kind of right on that he's smarter than what most people give him credit for. Now he's theatrical. Like he's got a very he's got a presence to him where people say, hey, that guy knows. He's got a confidence. Let's say, like, people call him confidence man, right? He's very confident. He knows how to be confident. There's legislatively, like, the people he fills within his cabinet are just horrible. They're warmongers. they're very censorship prone. I mean, heck, we got the whole reversal of the net neutrality, which is a big thing, and that got reversed on his watch. Even though he got rid of TPP, which was like the one good thing that almost everyone would say is good, but now he's trying to negotiate, new NAFTA, new ATIPA, which is going to be worse than TPP was. And you know all about the TPP because Australia, New Zealand, and a couple of other countries, they're involved in it.
I do think his trade war with China and Germany is fantastic, and I also think that what will happen with Brexit is he will immediately do a very favourable and strategically advantageous deal with Britain, I think that there's a lot at play geopolitically that I admire. Is bold and it's risky, but it's high reward, and America's just been sort of drifting away with its terms of manufacturing and things like this. I think the best person that was in the in his I forget the terminology because we call it a parliament or a government. Well, I reckon one of the best people was unfortunately let out pretty early, and that was Steve Bannon. Steve Bannon, for the most part, is someone I admire. I don't know about you, but I think, apart from being the architect of that victory, I think that yep.
I don't agree with a lot of Steve Bannon stuff, but he's a smart guy. I give him credit for that. I think he knows. He's got the pulse of what's going on, and he uses that as an advantage. As far as some of the things that he wants, like, I'm kind of anti-legislation in the first place, so yeah, I'm not going to agree with pretty much anybody out there. But I think he was good for the Trump administration, but letting him go, I think, was a bad move for Trump, as far as Trump politically. Yeah. Not that I really support anyone who's a politician, well, but as far as strategically, yeah, I agree with you.
I think I would describe myself as an economic nationalist in my own country, and I wish the same for any country. And I don't want because there's a lot of what can be seen on the surface as efficient can be incredibly disruptive to vast communities with lots of consequences, social consequences, and I think that. I think that Bannon understands that. I think Trump understands that to an extent, and it's part of their ideology, and it's part of why he's popular, and it's part of the reason why he'll be re-elected. I think that there's been a switch. I mean, the working class are increasingly, voting Republican, voting Trump. See, this is the thing. He's not really a Republican. He is the third party candidate that finally got a victory in his own way.
I wouldn't go there. A lot of the third party candidates, especially Green Party and Libertarians and a couple of others that are even smaller, they wouldn't be supporting the military occupation overseas. They wouldn't be supporting Israel, especially over Palestine. They wouldn't put in the cabinet members of either the Democrats or the Republicans. I'd say Trump has become more of I'd say he's more of a centrist, but he appears to people to be more of an independent. But that's mostly just because of his
Yeah,
antics.
yeah. I think he's a centrist, but he appears to most people like a right wing. When really he's a centrist. He's from New York, and if anything, he's more similar maybe to a Ross Perot, or maybe even just a little bit of Lyndon LaRouche. I think I think that's why I was sort of saying he's more like a third party candidate. I don't think he's a libertarian or a Greens thinking sort of person.
Yeah.
But I when you say, look, this is the thing. You can look at the fact that they're still in these military zones as a failure, or you can see the lack of new interventions as a win. It depends how you look at it.
Yeah,
and like I said about Syria,
I think no matter what, it's just the way you look at things. Like one thing I like about Trump is it's kind of opening a lot of people's eyes to what's going on with media,
yes.
with censorship, with different movements, with establishment of sex trafficking and a whole bunch of things. And regardless of his stance on certain things, I think it's revealing to a lot of people of what's actually at work, that people probably weren't aware of or even thought of before. But also from that point, the way that they look at things is still going to be slanted based on what the mainstream media has their slant on things, their spin. Sorry.
Yeah, but the entire mainstream media is almost against Trump, and yet people are still likely to vote against the mainstream media. And I think he's been a very big part, an overt and vocal part of waking people up and making people skeptical of the media and seeking out the alternative media. And he's been part of that process. Look, we are now in a very post-Trump world. I don't think that there was really anything particularly post-Obama. I don't think that there was anything all that radical, apart from bailing the banks out the way he did, and changing the meaning of marriage, perhaps. I don't quite understand Obamacare because it seems, we have socialized medicine in Australia. We like it, and it's way further down the line than Obamacare. Obamacare makes no sense to us, really. We don't understand what it is.
So Obamacare is a lot like Romney Care. So Mitt Romney, when he was the governor of Massachusetts, he instituted something called Romney Care, and basically Obama did the same thing, just in a national wide thing. And it's not quite social health care. You're basically those who can't afford it are just going to find something less affordable. But if you don't pick a plan, you're fined for it. So it really doesn't really help people who don't have enough money. You still have deductibles, which a lot of poor people don't benefit from anyway. So there's a lot of problems with it, and it was a Republican plan type of healthcare. It's that I would still not call it socialized healthcare, but it's now you've got, I think, was it Trump Care or something, which is just kind of also a step back. And I have a feeling that a lot of these types of like I tell a lot of people who watch, especially when I was kind of in that progressiveness type of thing, is that even if you want social health care or whatever you want what's that thing where you get either universal health care or universal wage or something like that, the current government and people in government aren't going to do it the right way. Like if you got Bernie Sanders in there as president, or Elizabeth Warren, someone's very progressive, maybe even Tulsi Gabbard.
It's completely. Sorry, I have to jump in and just say the obvious. Like it's so incoherent, because you can't have a large social program like that when you have an open border. It's not going to work. Australia has the absolute dream of the American left.
Well,
Like our healthcare system, you'll never have it. You'll never even
that's
get
one
close.
aspect. The
But
second,
we live on an island. We live on an island, and when boats come, we send them away.
yeah. So we're not even we haven't even taken that into consideration yet. First is still the House and the Senate with the United States. So the Congress, no matter what, they're not going to pass anything that a progressive candidate president is going to have. Also with that is if they do pass it, they're going to make sure that they pass it to fail. So here's the thinking, if you're a strategist at all, is like, all right, so say Bernie Sanders becomes president, he wants to pass something that's very socialized, and it gets voted on saying yes, they're gonna mandate it so that it's going to be so bogged down with either bureaucracy or something that it's not going to be beneficial at all. So when he goes up to re-election in, say, 2024, if he won 2020, they're going to say, yeah, what Bernie Sanders did or whatever this progressive did, yeah, we passed that and it didn't work. It's horrible. So we're going to go back and they're going to do something else. And then it might be worse for American people. But they're going to plan it on passing something that a lot of people want and make sure that it doesn't work so people will be happy when it goes back.
Does Romney Care work in whatever state that is?
In Massachusetts, not really.
Is it popular? Do people like it?
No, not really. People didn't like it that much in Massachusetts. I don't think a lot of people in the United States liked Obamacare. It's still you still have a lot of people without health care, and you got a lot of people who have insurance that can't afford to have some of the important things that they need. I mean, it's people who have problems with healthcare before Obamacare still have the same problems. So, yeah, it's not helping.
I definitely do think the public the socialized system we have in Australia is very successful. It is good. Yes, it does cost money. We don't pay for it directly. It just comes out of taxes. Sometimes we pay a small amount, like we call it a gap payment, where most of it is covered, but you might have to pay. You know, if you see a specialist, you may pay $25 or something. Almost all prescriptions. I guess it's just like Canada. I mean, do you see the Canadian system as successful or not?
I've never had Canadian system. I mean, I've got different accounts from what people say, but you know, if I can't really experience it, I don't know. But I think
there's no perfect system. Like there's no, but I can tell you that when it is, it's nice to. One reason why it's actually nice to have a public option, right? Because we have private healthcare too in Australia. Mm-hmm. What it does is it actually creates competition to the private sector. So the private sector has to not only kind of live up to the standard of the public sector, but they actually want to be better and have some more options. Mm-hmm. So it entices people to pay money to be involved with it. Yeah. But unless there's that kind of competition, I don't see how it can work, because you guys per capita spend way more on healthcare than Australians, and yet you have nowhere near the coverage. I would say I'm a conservative, you know, but I'm all for socialized medicine because I believe it works. I don't want to stick to one ideology on every issue, because my lived experience is that it's mostly very good. I can go see a doctor right now for free, you know, and I can get a prescription that will cost me probably $5 at the most. It's a good system that does give people dignity. It is a good. It's quite efficient. It's quite efficient because most people are in the public system, and sometimes they pay a little bit extra for some of the private stuff beyond that. But it's a pretty good balance. It's not perfect. Of course, there's problems. There's no such thing as death panels and that kind of stuff that they went on about in America. That was just crazy because that was just a corporation speaking. Yeah.
I mean,
I don't know that you guys will ever be able to enact it in your country because of the way things are set up. Yep. Your states are far more sort of independent. So it's probably a better idea for the states to do it in some ways. But yeah, it's like the gun debate. Like the more you learn about America, the more you realize, the more you understand its history and even its contemporary history, that taking away the guns is not going to solve anything. And it's very hard for an Australian to compute because we don't have a gun culture here, and we gave all our guns back. It was a very popular decision done by a conservative government in the mid-90s when there was a shooting, right? And yeah, look, okay, a few farmers were pissed off, but for the most part, we were happy with that decision. And when we look at America and we see the sort of shootings, you know, we don't understand that there's way more shootings every day with illegal firearms that will never be given back. They're all bought illegally, and that they aren't going away. And not only that, but there have been times, even in contemporary history in America, where there have been riots and things, and the police did not come to help. You know, like in those Los Angeles riots, it was the Koreans, like the Korean shop owners. I mean, that's a very real thing. So you have a far more complex. You know, it's not an easy answer. I mean, what's your position on guns? I'm assuming you're very pro-gun, but what are your feelings on it?
I'm pro-freedom. So yeah, people should be free, and I think the United States Constitution, the Bill of Rights, they did a good start. It wasn't as, I mean, basically the founding fathers in the United States said, hey, it should be given that we're all individually free, so we don't need to write it down because there's too many freedoms to write down that shouldn't be infringed upon. And then they go, well, people may not know that, so might as well write it down, and they could add more to it if needed. So that was kind of the entire point. But for me, yeah, there shouldn't be any censorship. And First Amendment, it's even stated in the Bill of Rights, shall make no law, and in the Second Amendment is shall not be infringed. That's why it's 1 and 2, and they state specifically that there should be no law or shall not be infringed. I mean, you got a lot of the other amendments within the Bill of Rights. They don't really have that same type of writing into it where they explicitly say, hey, shall make no law, shall not be infringed. So one of the things I do notice is a lot of people who are very adamant about the First Amendment will censor the ones who are very adamant about the Second Amendment. And it's the ones who are very adamant about the Second Amendment who are also very adamant about the First Amendment, because to protect the Second Amendment, you need the First Amendment. But if you have the First Amendment, you don't need to have the second one, because you could just censor those who support the Second Amendment or any other amendment, you know. So I think that freedom, that First Amendment is very, very big, very, very important. When you shut down any conversation at all about any of the other freedoms out there, you've got a problem with how freedom works and what you're going to allow to have control over every individual within the country, which is very anti-American.
Okay, but a stupid question perhaps, but I'm assuming when you mean there shouldn't be any censorship, obviously child pornography should not be legal. They should not be allowed, right?
They should be, if they are allowed, they should have people to find them and prosecute the ones who are using them. We have a problem now in the United States where the FBI and even mainstream articles state that the FBI personnel have been caught trafficking child pornography, etc. But the public don't know if anything happened to these individuals or anything like that. We don't know what else is going on, and so we've got this. The censorship is pretty much in all areas. The American people don't know what's going on. We know a lot of shit is going down, but we don't know what's going on. So is it stopping anything? So
just to be clear, though, what would your position? I couldn't quite understand what you said at the beginning. So you would be absolutely for the censorship of child pornography, correct?
I don't want that stuff out there, but like it would be an illegal thing. So if it's illegal, you take it down. But you get into that point of, well, what's illegal? What do we dictate is illegal? I mean, it's the same as if just people killing people live and airing it. We don't want that. But it's also necessary when we see something like that going on, when like Chelsea Manning shows people in a helicopter just shooting down civilians. And so if
do you think you're taking...
So if that was censored, we would know that the military was conducting behavior in that way. You see what I mean? So
not really, because I can't see how child pornography could ever be morally justified in any sense.
Same with killing anyone else. Killing innocent civilians is not justified. But the thing is, if it was censored, never shown to the public, we wouldn't know that it was going on. You see what I'm saying?
Yes, I know, but I'm
saying not to have it. I would say not. There are going to be people who will. The weird thing is the people who get off on watching these things, where there's people killing people or child pornography or things like that. I'm almost at that kind of weird point of, someone was saying, I forgot who I was watching, but people, I think it's Dave Chappelle, if people watch that stuff but they don't ever act on it, I would rather have that than people who are so suppressed about it that they act on it and don't just watch it. Do you see what I mean? So actually going out there and raping children, horrible. But actually, if there's stuff out there already that the FBI has and whatever, and people who are known pedophiles or whatever, they can have access to that, so they don't ever act out on it. If that's something psychologically that seems to work, I would rather have that than have actually them act out on it. But then there's also that part of, well, because they're seeing it, maybe they will act out on it. But it's the same thing with violence with video games. Like people,
doesn't there need to be a victim in the first place to create this pornography?
Yeah, but so if a lot of that stuff is already there, then it's already there.
See, this is where I think that you philosophically paint yourself into a corner.
Yeah, I know. It's a tough one.
And I think that sometimes common sense needs to prevail rather than a broad ideological principle, and things really need to be a bit more case by case. Otherwise, you paint yourself into a corner, and you find yourself basically saying something that is, in your heart is morally wrong, but you don't want to defy your what you see as the perfect ideal for the world. And I think that's a mistake.
I think like if there's someone who's uploading stuff like that, I think there should be something done. I mean, that just as a society, whoever will make the decision about that as a nation or whatever group or organization. But if there's stuff out there that's going on that is, for example, say that there's pedophilia material from very high profile politicians. You think that's ever going to be outed to the public if the FBI, CIA, or NSA or someone catches it? No, I don't think so.
I don't see how it's relevant to the argument of whether it should be legal for the rest of society. I think it's not relevant, and it's a false comparison or analogy.
It's more of like, if it's, I don't know how to say this. Like,
you're being very consistent, but it's consistent to the point of painting yourself in a corner where it's like you don't really believe what you're saying, but you're trying to be true to some principles. And I think
no, because not everyone's going to see things the same way I do, and I'm not going to see the same way as someone else does. For me, I would not watch it or utilize it, but I would want it revealed when someone is caught with it, especially.
But that's very different. That's very different.
Especially with the government. No, it's not different, because if you've got someone, I mean, especially when we get whistleblowers, and that's what whistleblowers do. They reveal corruption, things that are done wrong, and they reveal it to the public. But if that same person, that same whistleblower went to the government and said, hey, my captain or this politician, this governor did this, something should be done. You know what's going to happen? That person's going to be, hey, don't ever speak about this. We'll take that away from you. The population doesn't ever see it again. But then because we live in such a system where there's nothing at all that's transparent. Everything is so opaque that even if we go through channels to reveal what should be public knowledge, it's heavily redacted with FOIA requests, Freedom of Information Acts. That shouldn't be the case. And the people who are in those positions of government, like the FBI, CIA, NSA, they're appointed positions from those who've been elected into government. The public, the people of the United States, they don't get to vote on who gets to be appointed within those positions. So it's a thing that should be decided upon the people, whether or not it should be applied and what could be applied to them. And it is a difficult one, because
I still don't think that the legalization of even pre-existing child pornography has anything to do with whistleblowing. And I think that it, in fact, is quite consistent to be against child pornography and to be for the whistleblowing for the exact same reason that you want child pornography to be banned. So I think
anytime that there's anything uploaded, anytime there's stuff on a server, all of that has to come from somewhere with the IP address, and there's a couple of other things where you can find out who's uploading, and you can trace it. So basically, all of that should be public knowledge, so people can find out who these people are, and we could find out.
I'm not against that, but I don't see why we need to legalize child pornography to make people accountable. Because the thing is, if you legalize child pornography, what are you making them accountable for? That they could argue they're doing something perfectly illegal. So I don't quite understand your logic.
Well, I'd say there's two parts to it. For one, the minors don't have a say in whether they're not, I guess you could say, of legal status or whatever. They don't have that mentality. They don't have that intellectual ability to make those types of decisions for themselves. So that's one. So being able to have that out there, that's not, well, that shouldn't be allowed. But then you've got the parents' case, and this is where things get sticky, because there are states within the United States where it's still legal to get married, I think for as young as maybe 13 or 14, as long as the parents approve and the judge approves. So you can still have someone who's like, I don't know, 18 marrying someone who's like 14, as long as like the judge approves, and you're still having sex underage within that state. But if it's legalized, then it's fine. So that could be something that's done, even though that's weird. But that's one part.
I understand. Yeah. I would be against that myself. I think that's wrong. But I still don't understand why it's such a quandary for you whether it should be legal or not. Because
Because
particularly in regards to the whistleblowing, because what would they be blowing the whistle for if it was legal? If it was legal, it would, because I think children should be protected, and I think that there would be an absolute consensus in society. I don't think that that's an oppressive elite position to have child pornography illegal. I think there's a consensus on that. There's a common sense a consensus, and if anything, I would say some of the elites are trying to subvert that. And I'll ask you this question then, which is, you kind of brought this up. The French Marxist philosophers that came up with gender theory and queer theory, they all signed a petition to completely remove the age of consent in France, which was already 15, already as low as 15. How do you feel about that?
I personally am against that. But as far as if you're, I don't know. It's like, I don't think certain children, or even adults for that matter, are ready for certain things. But who gets to dictate that? Should that be society, or should that be the parents? And so, and if they don't have parents, then that's just another thing. Maybe. Then is it?
I feel like you're following a kind of logical argument that's coming from a broader philosophy you have, and it is stopping you from making some common sense positions on these matters. I think it's that's my opinion.
That's fine. I mean, these are questions and conversations that should be had, not just be decided upon by a few select individuals that decides it for millions, if not billions, of people.
I think that there are almost no perfect laws, but I tell you what, that sometimes there can be some even worse absence of laws, and it's on matters like this where children are not protected. I think that children should be sacred, and even when they are,
but I'm not going to trust. But I'm not just going to trust the establishment, the people who are in control now, to preserve that protection with children when we're seeing pedophilia rings being busted within governmental systems of politicians, of celebrities, people in power. That's sure. We're not, if we're relying on them right now to protect our children. That's not happening. Well, so first, that should be the first thing that should be addressed, and that's not being addressed at all.
You're taking an extreme argument where you're saying all laws come from the top and the elite, and that are not reflective of society's innate values to begin with. Well, I think it's a two-way street. I think it's a combination of both, and of course there's a lot of laws that are just instruments of power. I understand that. But,
how many laws have been in place since you were born, and how many laws have passed since you've been born? You're going to pretty much 95, 99% of the laws that have ever existed have been in place before you were even born. So we've had no say. You had no say into any of those laws. Neither have I.
No, but many of those laws, and I would say most of them, are common sense. I agree that
maybe common sense in a certain era, but not now. I mean, how does a law that was made in 1885 affect you today? Should that be revisited, or should that law stay in place because it's common sense for people way back in 1885?
Okay, so are you saying that we need to reform? Well, I guess you can just go back to the original question. Are you saying the age of consent needs to go? Because according to that,
that's something that should be handled by the people who are living now. Not people who've lived back in a couple of decades ago, where you had no say. One of those.
You are one of those people. So what is your particular choice on the matter?
I'd like to hear what everyone else's opinions are too. But we're never going to have that conversation if we don't even revisit those in just a matter of speaking, and whether or not the current laws are being correctly being instituted now, or being, I don't know what you would call it, or being protected. I mean, right now what we're saying is just the laws only apply for the common citizens, but not the people who are in charge or in power. There are exceptions to all these laws. So for one, we can't even have the conversation of revisiting and revamping any of the laws that we see, because we don't know how good that they're working now, because we have no idea. All the statistics and stuff are either made up or false, or how much can we trust it from a government that's corrupt and that they lie all the time? I mean, there used to be third-party organizations where we can actually run, check to make sure everything's running the correct way with the government, but then a lot of that stuff is run by corporations or nonprofits, whatever, of rich people who are pretty much putting people in power anyways with their money. I mean, one of the big conspiracy theories that people have, especially with secret societies and things like that, is you do something where, and we see it all the time. Just look at Nexolum, whatever, right? You go in, yeah. You what they do is when you're in, you provide something to them where if you decide to leave, that they're going to go ahead and release publicly, and that pretty much ruins you. And so that's pretty much what's going on. And I think, like, even the Catholics, when they have, when you've...
I still don't understand why any of these arguments, no matter how bad it gets, is any kind of reason to legalize something that surely we could both agree is horrifying and horrible to happen to children.
Yeah, and I say we need to have a broader context where people have a voice in it. I don't want the decision to be just based on my voice alone, or just yours or someone else who's voted in. We're now at the age in technology where we can have public polls and have receipts to those polls, so everyone knows who it is, and just state, whether if they support it or not. It could be anonymous, but as long as people have a receipt, we can have accountability for it. So we don't have that stuff in place. I mean, everyone has, people say, oh, there's just security issues with that. Well, we have everything we do online. All our banks are online. We have people, you can log into your stocks, make trades online. So, that idea, that conversation, from that point of view, is bogus. But that idea is, we're all a part of the system that's in place now. A lot of us didn't have any voice or decision. There's still a lot of old legalities hanging around that could be revamped or revisited, yet no legislator chooses any differently, especially within state laws. And
can I just ask?
Go ahead.
Yes, go.
I'm just saying we need to take a look at everything and just have everyone voice in their opinion, and not just have people who are gatekeepers or whatever, just making the decision for everybody else. I don't know if he dropped or what happened. I'll wait for a little bit. It's a good conversation. I mean, I don't know the answer to it. I don't think whatever decision I make, people are going to have the same decision. Everyone's different. Everyone has their own idea for it. We don't know if it's going to be good or bad from the result of any decision. A lot of it is based off of what other countries, if they've done it, how is it going for them? What problems occur for them. But we're getting into that, what conspiracy theorists say, the new world order, where every country is going to be the same. Every country is going to have their McDonald's and the same laws and the same restrictions and the same control mechanisms, the same money, currency, etc. And when we have that, we won't have the ability to experiment and see what works better, or what works and what doesn't work. And sometimes the best thing to know is, all right, no problem. I see the chat. Hey, I'm bleached. Haven't seen you in a while. Yeah, sounds right, Claude Alley. Let me change it.
Hello.
Yep.
Hey man, I'm back. I was able to hear you through the stream.
Yep.
I actually just wanted to ask because you brought up the Nexium thing and how they make you do something or they find some information on you, so that they've got you captive and that they basically own. Now I'm going to bring up someone who you're probably going to roll your eyes. I'll make sure I'm watching the screen to see if I can see you rolling your eyes.
Right.
Alex Jones said recently that this is an ancient thing, that this has always been this way.
Yeah. I mean, just look at the Catholics and with their confessions. I mean, what do you think that they do with those confessions with people who confess very heinous things? They probably go to them and say, "Hey, you know, we know that you did this, and you know, we'll absolve all your sins if you do this for us." And of course, it won't be a sin because you're doing it for the church. So they kind of know people who are murderers or pedophiles or whatever from people who confess. I mean, but that's just one aspect. But yeah, that practice has probably been going on for a long time. Actually, what they used to do is they would just kill you, actually. Because back then, what they would do is they would just kill you if they found out that you were doing something you weren't supposed to do within, or revealing secrets or whatnot. But in this day and age, because there is technology where you could reveal stuff and put stuff out there and go public and things like that, and be anonymous at the same time, they have to take different measures and things like that. So they won't outright kill you, except certain, I'd say, societies. But yeah, I'd say that stuff goes on.
It's not just about stopping a person from doing a certain action, but it's also a way of getting people to do things as well. Mm-hmm. Because once they're under your power and they have that power over you, you have no choice. So it's just really interesting to hear it. What felt like a very modern sort of entrapment or something is apparently quite ancient, and I just never heard of it being put that way because I haven't really explored that subject. But I know that's the kind of thing they do in the Church of Scientology. They keep very meticulous records in their sort of auditing sessions, and they're always trying to get you to reveal information. And you know, it's a principle I understand. I mean, I don't know if you read much of the Whitney Webb writing on the Epstein case, but that's led to all kinds of horrible things that intelligence agencies have done, like you say, with child sex and all those kinds of things. It's like a really disturbing extreme of game theory or something. It's really it's horrible.
And what's interesting is Dave Chappelle. I'm not sure if it was exactly him, but someone else was saying, you know, if everyone just stepped up and revealed all the things that were where if it was revealed that they get in trouble for it, but just let everyone do it, you know, everyone come clean. You know, I think everything would start better at that point, because then you get to see all the players who are on it, but all the let's say the managers, the people on top that are managing all the players with all that stuff, and see who's controlling who with what, and you know, if the people who are doing wrong stuff are held back from it, if it all gets revealed, no one has anything left to lose. They all lost, and so all the secrets come out. We can all just reestablish better people, I guess, hopefully better people into it, and just kind of crack down on all the corruption. Because I think once you get yourself into that situation, and some people do, I mean, whether it's they just made a bad decision, or maybe they're coaxed into it, or, they fell in love, because, it's just like the Nexium thing is like, people really fell in love with that guy or something. People are like very charismatic and able to do stuff like that to other people. And it's like a brainwashing kind of effect. And same thing, I think I hear stories of like Mormonism, where women would get engaged or married with a man with other women that were the wives, and they thought it was okay, and they wanted out and they can't get out. Getting in is easy. It's getting out that's hard for everybody that's in those situations. And but the thing is like, as a society, is just people is like, are they going to be forgiven? I mean, of course, there's going to be certain things that they're going to have to, people within society might have to do. Otherwise, you'll have some members in society who will take the law into their own hands. So something has to come from it. But I think there has to be some sort of, I don't know what you call it. You know how sanctity or sanction for individuals who come out with it and have protection. But now, all the protections is in the hands of the government. So we need actual individuals that are outside of that, and it's hard to trust anybody these days. So it's a very difficult situation we've got into.
I think it would be impossible, and could unleash consequences that we don't understand even. I'm not saying that things shouldn't be exposed, but it's so hard to tell what the truth is, that there'd be different, people would be denying certain things, and I think that we're living in a time when you could fake things like that too, and you could frame people. I think that it's a tough time to. I think it's a tough time to have a sort of coherent vision forward. That's one of the problems with change. I believe that. I mean, when I listen to Alex Jones talk about this, and he's sort of talking about these sort of both sort of occult origins, but this sort of futurist ideals at the same time of these groups. They're both heavily into the occult, like the people that set up NASA, and then but they're totally looking forward to the future of living forever and maybe depopulating the planet so it can just be an elite that survives. It's like, he seems to have a fairly coherent explanation, at least. Whether it's true or not is debatable, but it at least kind of makes sense as a narrative. I think he's quite good in what I like about Alex Jones is zooming out from him, just zooming out from everything that he says, and I think there's something truthful in a general sense, occasionally in a specific sense as well. But he does, at least for me, have just an interesting view of what he describes as a breakaway civilization. That's what it seems to particularly with the Epstein revelations and his sort of into eugenics and futurist ideas. It does seem. It seems that the elites are very bored with normal human delights now. They're quite bored with just simple material possessions, and they're going for something much bigger than that. And maybe they've been working on this for a while. I don't know. What do you think?
I'm not one of them, so I don't know how to think like them. Um, yeah, I mean, isn't that the problem with greed? Is you just don't know when to stop. It's just the accumulation of it is actually better than just the spending of it. I mean, it's like some people are good with like a $500 monthly paycheck. Some people say,
Yeah,
they need that $5 million paycheck, even though their expenses are maybe like $200,000 a year. Even though they make $5 million a year, they go, that $5 million ain't enough. It's like, you've got that surplus where almost nobody has, but it's just that need to have more of it when you don't need it, where people who just, they're good with what they got. So people who are in that mindset of greed or whatever, they're not going to be happy with however much they get. They just want to keep getting it, and that's materialism sickness or whatever. I don't know what you would call it.
yeah. That's why I like the tradition of Christianity that I'm a part of. I realize there's some fairly greedy forms of Christianity and Christians, but my mother is very selfless. Will always go without to give to others, and it's greed is seen as a sin, and I think that's why I think that's why I think they're that's why I think it's a good thing. Because I mean, like, if I followed your freedom argument, there shouldn't be a problem with greed. Like this is the thing. Your kind of general freedom idea has an issue when it comes up against these sorts of moral ideas, and I think once you reconcile the two, that's when they both really need to be compromised. Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah, I know, but look, everyone has to have their say into it. It shouldn't be decided by just a few for the many. Some people, I think many are pretty much already adamant about one way or another. So it's just,
Yeah,
how do you appease, I guess, the minority is what I would say. So you've got people who are adamant about freedom. So how do you get the people from that standpoint to do it? Because most of those people also who are just more in favor of freedom than the actuality of what that's proposed. Just like the child pornography point of view, or killing of innocent civilians point of view, or the handling of access of weapons point of view. I mean, there's always going to be a minority that they just support more of the freedom than the actual whatever it is. Like, I don't support child pornography, but there should be a freedom to discuss whether that should be allowed or not.
sure. I never said that it shouldn't be discussed, and we were discussing it, but I certainly was against it, and
Yeah,
you
I
had
mean,
you kind of had trouble
yeah. Look,
personally.
it's like
Yeah,
abortion is a big one, right? Because it's like,
yeah.
who should have control? Should it be no one has abortions? Should it be the choice of the mother to have the abortion? So
What's your view?
for me, I'm against abortion, but I support the choice of the mother to choose whether or not to have the baby. I mean, that's just the way of it. I don't support it. I don't agree with it, but it's the freedom of choice for the individual, it's a matter to them. I'm never gonna have a child. I'm a man, right? So I'm never gonna have an abortion. At most, I'm gonna know if I'm ever involved where I impregnate someone and they're gonna have the choice whether they're gonna have the abortion. I'm always gonna say, let's have the child. The choice isn't up to me. But again, just because I support it or don't support it doesn't mean I'm a get. I have a opinion one way or another, but then also I have the stance of let's leave that freedom to the individual.
I have a theory I've been thinking about lately that men and women can both do some pretty evil things, and it can often be enabled by the other sex. And when you look at, say, the Epstein case, you look at his procurer of young girls, and it was an adult woman that was enabling him. And I kind of feel that when men back out of the abortion debate and go, oh, I'm not a woman, I can't have an opinion on this, or it's not ultimately for me to decide, I feel like it's almost the same thing. And in my opinion, I think this runs deep, and I think it's connected to the male suicide topic. I think that men, deep down, I mean, you said that they're just not able to adapt. I would say that deep down they know there's a problem and there's nothing they can do about it. And I would say abortion is one of those things, even if they're not entirely conscious of it. My belief it is wrong and that it is murder, and particularly a full term, perfectly healthy child, for instance. But even if it's not perfectly healthy, I still tend to think it is murder. That's how I feel. And if it is murder, and if we can agree murder is wrong, I don't know how extreme we take the freedom principle or how extreme you take it. I think that means there's something deeply wrong at the heart of the society. And even though they might not know it, I think spiritually there is something wrong. And that's why I think we live in a chaotic time, because, if human life can't even be sacred, it makes everything sort of morally relativist. And I think it's an unconscious thing. It's almost subliminal thing in how it affects people. I don't think they literally go, "Oh, abortion is legal, I'm going to kill myself," but I somehow feel it's connected because of my own personal life and experience. So I feel it's just, life is complicated, and I think we would be better off if instead of making it legal, if we just made sure that women were supported and that the family was a supported idea, and that our society was, in Australia, for instance, it is so hard to afford to buy a house. Almost nobody in my generation can afford a home. And that means it's very hard to start a family. So if someone does get pregnant, it's like, well, we can't afford to get a home together. I need to live in this one bedroom flat or apartment. It's almost engineered against the family. And I think that we should do everything we can to make life easier and supportive towards families. And that's why I like what's happening in, say, Poland or Hungary, where women that have more than 2 or 3 kids, I think they pay no tax for the rest of their life. And there's all these incentives for people to start families. And, I really believe something is deeply wrong, but it's so complex and of such an old school fuddy-duddy kind of thing to say that people can't really talk about it because they'll sound square or they'll sound, not feminist or, and I think something is deeply wrong because men and women are unhappy in their own ways at different stages of life. And it's coming from these changes. It's not working. And that's why there's these suicides. And you can tell people to adapt, but adapt to what? There's conforming or there's trying to find another way to repair this problem. Because we're moving away from the optimum. We're moving away from so many, like I said, even when women are having children, they're having them at 40, so that their genetics is further damaged with age. And then those kids, it's not optimum. It's not optimum from a natural point of view. This is not optimum circumstances.
Yeah. It's no one said it's gonna be easy. But again, no one never said it was supposed to be this hard.
I like having I like having the conversations that are kind of like the opposite of those freedom ones, where I actually want to argue essentially for a lack of freedom. I actually want to say no. I think abortion should be basically illegal and or very very hard to acquire, but also a society that is ready for children and ready to support them, and that mothers are not seen as stupid or inferior to working in a call center. You know, like I think that the values are shifted. I think that capitalism in many ways has capitalism and feminism are very much intertwined. It's it's not just it's complicated. That part I will definitely agree with you.
I mean, one of the good things about it, a lot of differentiation, especially with countries, is that we can all have different based on people who live in a certain location, whether it's a country or a state or a city or whatever, a specific region. We could decide based on the people who are there. And so, yeah, if you wanted to live in Poland because of this the way that things are run there, like less freedom, that's fine. I think that's great. But then there really isn't any other country so far where the premise is to have freedom to start out. So those who aren't afraid of freedom, America's the place for you. You know, that should be an option because there really isn't any country out there right now with that type of freedom. So I think it's good to preserve freedom where it's at, and those who don't want as much freedom, well, there's also places for that too. But then we get to that point of, well, you got one country that's so free and one country that's not. You know, does that mean that country that's free is free to do whatever they want to the other country, type of thing? You know, so that
when you say freedom and that America has generally been free, you'll see that those states that are supportive of gun rights will be equally supportive of making it hard, if not illegal, to have abortion.
They're not related in any way. They're each their own demographic.
Don't you think they're linked? Because they generally like there seems to be a bit of a common link there of a lot of the traditional gun owners are sort of patriotic Christians, and so they're all for the sort of founding fathers' vision, but they're Christians and they don't want babies aborted and murdered. I think that the word abortion is such a it's such a linguistic game. It's like collateral damage in warfare. You know, like it's that kind of language. I think that the power over linguistics, the power of linguistics and controlling the narrative just simply by what the words are, frames things. Because it's very, for the most part, most people have never seen an abortion. They've never seen pictures of it. They don't know even how it's done. They don't know that the baby is trying to squirm away from being stabbed in the heart or in the brain. If they knew that, if they had the freedom to know, maybe they wouldn't be for that freedom.
Yeah, but they wouldn't have that knowledge without the freedom in the first place. So we kind of have this catch-22 going on, you know? Anyways, I'm going to end it for tonight. That is a long 3 hours and 5 minutes. And thank you for coming on.
I had no idea. Thanks for having me on the program. It's been really, really good. You've given me a lot to think about.
Yeah. Same with me. You know, it's like even though I have my own opinions on things, you know, the idea that people should have the freedom to choose, that's I need to get better at just kind of stating that. Because my personal feelings, my personal opinions do get in the way of what I think. I mean, what should be allowed, but I think it should be more of a group colony, whatever thing, you know. It's like if I find out that there's like and it's in a, like my town, if there's like people who support child pornography because they like watching child pornography, I'd be like, I'm out of here, right? You know, but I wouldn't know that unless that was like known, right? But also if there's other like-minded people who's like, no, all your freedoms should be denied. You need to live under the strict regimental guidelines of this community. I'd be gone too. You know, what I would love to find is like, yeah, I don't support that, but you know, freedom to choose. But if we had to choose, you would probably choose this. So, you know, I'd be like, oh, I found my community, you know. But it's not always perfect. Everyone grows up differently, and well, I think that's kind of the point of it all. But thanks for stopping on, and everyone who's watching and chatting. Thank you, and we'll probably see you tomorrow night.
Thanks, Evan. God bless.
Yeah, you too. Bye.